Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and this is the summary for the day of 498 for the 6th of July. Let's start off with the Southern Front. We do not have any reports of any fighting over at the Dachi area. Particularly, we are talking about the Antonovsky Bridge region with the Ukrainian forces actually supposedly have this salient here or little bridgehead over here where they can continuously land troops over at this area of Dachi. However, we do not really have any information of any fighting over the past 24 hours at this place. Moving into the Zaporizhzhia Front. At the Zaporizhzhia Front, we still have fighting over at the Kayamsky sector, particularly we're talking about Petikaki and Zeribyanki. So the Ukrainian forces reportedly, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, is fighting near Petikaki as well as Remelin 21 and Braiba. Pro-Russian sources talking about the Ukrainians attacking Zeribyanka. So the Ukrainian forces continue to be fighting in this region here as they secure Petikaki. Probably, maybe pushing out, we're not sure because of what it means by fighting near Petikaki. But there is fighting definitely over at Zeribyanki. So that's all we have over here. There's no captures or anything. Over at the Orikhiv sector. So this is Orikhiv sector. The fighting over in the northern part of Robotine continues, with the Ukrainian forces continue to be pushing south. Similarly, the way they fight continues to be in small group of infantry, moving through the forest line. So there's a lot of forest region over here. All this one line of forest going around the farmlands, and these are what the Ukrainian forces is actually using to hide from drones and everything to move towards the Russian positions, and that's how they fight. No much progress to really talk about this information coming from pro-Russian sources and pro-Ukrainian sources. So, and moving on, we go into the Huyaipole sector. This is Huyaipole, and in the Huyaipole sector, we have some skirmishes at Dorozyanka. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, DRGU movements over at Dorozyanka. And that's all we have over the Huyaipole sector. Moving into the Velika Novosilka sector. I did the arrow map video on Velika Novosilka sector where I actually break down everything about the front. And main thing to talk about here in the SITREP is that the Ukrainian forces, there's no fighting reported all around the entire sector, with the exception towards Staromayorsky and Uruzaine. So which means that there's a likelihood that the Ukrainians are focusing on purely on these two towns. Fighting is reported by the Russian Defense Ministry, where they are attacking mainly on those two sides. Uruzaine one is not exactly an attack; it's more like a probing, whereas the main attacks coming from at Makarivka region towards Staromayorsky. But that's all. Suddenly the intensity of the fighting over the Velika Novosilka sector have dropped by a lot, but I believe the offensive will still continue. Moving into the Donetsk Front. At the Donetsk Front, we have fighting reported over at the Novo-Mikhailivka region. Information from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry with the Russian forces probably pushing still in the northern part of Novo-Mikhailivka. And then over at the Marinka sector, Marinka city or town, the Russian forces is continuing pushing over at Marinka. There is a Ukrainian Sukhoi 25 shot down over Georgievka, which is here. So a Ukrainian Sukhoi 25 shot down over that place. Over at the northwest of Donetsk city, which is Avdiivka Front. This is Avdiivka city, and the Avdiivka Front, Ukrainian offensive over along on the western part of Avdiivka continues with fighting reported at Nevelsky, Povomaysky, at Vodian, somewhere near Zhivane, which is here, and towards Opine. So Opine, Vodian, Povomaysky, and Nevelsky. These are the main areas that fighting is. However, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that the Russians are also making an attack over at Povomaysky. So it's kind of unclear. Information coming from the various sources, from the Deep State UA pro-Ukrainian sources to Russian Defense Ministry to pro-Russian source. And so that's all from the western part of Avdiivka. On the eastern part, we still have reports from Deep State UA, the pro-Ukrainian source, talking about the Russians making a push towards Avdiivka from the east. We do not have any information further than that. In the north, we have fighting reported at Krasnohorivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. We are unclear where the fighting comes from. Is it from the north or is it from the west? It's unclear. And that's all from the Avdiivka Front. Moving into the New York Front, we have no reports about any fighting over at New York. And into the Bakhmut Front, this is Bakhmut City. And at Bakhmut Front, we have fighting reported towards Bilohora, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, saying that the Russians are attacking towards that direction. And they also claim that there is the Kremlin 21 say that the Russian forces is counterattacking over at Klishchiivka. He says that the Russian forces still have positions in the western part of Klishchiivka and in the northern part. However, we do have geolocation coming from pro-Ukrainian sources saying that showing that there is bombardment at this region here, which means that the Ukrainian forces actually have already penetrated. There's some kind of salience now over in the northwestern part of Klishchiivka, and the Russian forces are counterattacking to try to push out a bit. Maybe they are counterattacking this area as well to try to push the Ukrainians back out of this area here. Situation is very, very critical for the Russians because the fall of this town will be disastrous for the defense effort. And I also did a arrow map video on this thing. It's on the DPA War channel. Do check it out. I think you will enjoy it. Over at the southeastern part of Bakhmut city, in the southeastern part, there is information from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry saying that the Russians are attacking near Ivaniske. Information coming from Surya maps suggesting that the Ukrainian forces have this salient here, or this progress that was already mapped by us sometime back, based on the information from, I think, Ryba. I cannot remember. So these are belated information from the Surya maps. In the northern flank, we have fighting reported at near Bakhmut, with the Ukrainian forces, according to Deep State UA and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, suggesting that the Ukrainians are still making progress towards Bakhmut. However, information coming from pro-Russian sources suggests the opposite. They said what they say is that the Russians are actually making progress to push back the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are getting pushed back away from Bakhmut. So we shall continue to monitor and see what is exactly the situation over here. Bakhmut is yet another one of those towns, just like Klishchiivka, where the Russians cannot lose, because losing Bakhmut means losing Dubovo-Vasilevka, and that will allow the Ukrainians to break through and send fighting over at Paraskovievka and Pihorodne, and that will compromise the entire northern flank of the Bakhmut city for the Russians. So it's definitely critical for the Russians not to lose the town. Over at the Siversk Front, at the Siversk city, Siversk Front, the fighting mainly is over at the eastern part of the front line. There is Ukrainian attack towards Zolotarivka. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Zolotarivka is actually this town over here, and Ukrainian forces attacking. This is actually in the northwest of Svatove-Kupyansk, which is where the massive infrastructure of oil refineries are, and just off the Lysychansk. And over at Bilohorivka, there is a conflict of information of fighting as well. The Russian Defense Ministry say that the Ukrainians are sending probing forces at Bilohorivka. However, the Kremlin 21 say that the Russians managed to capture the entire of the industrial area, as well as Ukrainian Defense Ministry saying that the Russians are actually on the attack. So another one, we are not too sure exactly what is the situation on the ground. The industrial area is not that big. It's actually only here, unless you want to count in the entire quarry area. So the rest is just not really industrial. So not exactly sure, because we have already said that this area has been captured by the Russians for at least a week now. Moving into the Kreminna Front. This is Kreminna city. At the Kreminna Front, within the Siversk Forestry, so this is actually the entire forest. The Siversk Forestry, we have fighting with the Russians, pro-Russian sources reporting that the Russians continue to make advances. Slowly, they are pushing and capturing Ukrainian strongholds within the forestry. However, the Russian Defense Ministry says that the Ukrainians actually launched an attack with the forces of the 95th Airborne Assault and 42nd Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. They are actually attacking within the forestry, and then they got bombarded and defeated by Russian units. So definitely some active fighting over at the Svatove-Kupyansk forestry. The Ukrainian forces also launched an attack on the Torske region. All this attack from Yankolivka at Torske and Yampolivka, is actually corroborating earlier informations. I'm not sure if you have caught it, but there was once upon a time in one of the SITREP that I said that Ukrainian forces have gathered forces over at Liman. So, and then I say that the gathering of forces over in these regions here would suggest that there might be some kind of offensive, and probably we are actually now looking at this offensive right now, where the Ukrainians are actually launching a multiple offensive across the entire front line over at Kreminna, and the Russians are currently trying to hold them back. There is no indications that the Ukrainians are having the upper hand just yet, but the fighting is definitely a lot heavier than it was maybe 2 weeks ago. There is also fighting reported at Nevsky. Mainly these are probings or scouting forces from the Ukrainians, and that's all from the Kreminna Front. This is Kreminna. Moving into the Svatove Front, this is Svatove city, and at Svatove Front we have some heavy fighting suddenly happening over in this area here. Previously we have fighting being said that the Russians attacked Novoyehorivka. This information, however, is then contradicted by the Russian Defense Ministry report on the 6th of July, probably talking about the previous day. They say that the Ukrainians are actually the one attacking, and they are attacking Kovalivka. And then the pro-Russian source and Ukrainian Defense Ministry actually says that there is fighting over at, actually it's the Ukrainian Defense Ministry say that there is a Russian attack over at Kamazhinivka, which is over here. So definitely this entire area is currently having heavy fighting. Ryba reported, and this footage actually went viral, the Swedish CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle, which looks a lot like a tank but with a smaller turret, which is actually really beautiful, has been destroyed. The first of its kind getting destroyed in combat. It did not really meet the enemies. It got spotted and then it got bombarded by artillery and got destroyed. This is the first documented destruction of this kind of vehicle. And further up north, the other fighting is over at the Novoselivsky region, with the Remlin 21 saying that the Russians have progressed to the first street. So the Russian forces have progressed to the first streets of Novoselivsky as they carry on their momentum that after capturing the railway station over here. The Russian Defense Ministry, however, said that the Ukrainians are trying to attack Russian positions. So yeah, we shall see how this goes. The enemy units are forced to withdraw from the positions they previously held, which also suggests that the Russians are actually also on the offensive over at this area here. So the fighting over in Novoselivsky is raging. It looks like the Russians are very determined this time around to capture the town. Especially we have the Russian Defense Ministry talking about this very specifically. Previously, the fighting over at Novoselivsky is more of being talked about by the OSIN, or the open source intelligence, rather than by the official source. So with the official source, the Ministry of Defense talking about it, maybe we are looking at a more concerted effort by the Russian forces to try to capture Novoselivsky. And over the Kupyansk Front, it continues to be really quiet. We do not have any information over at the Kupyansk region, and nothing over at the Kharkiv region, nor at the border regions between Russia and Ukraine. And that's it for the summary of the day of night 498 for the 6th of July. Do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next update.